All right, we're going to look at the next level of difficulty problem. We're going to have some factoring problems where we have to do two steps of factoring. But first I wanted to review with one of the basic problems just to kind of warm ourselves up here. This is a trinomial. It's got 1, 2, 3 terms, and there is no greatest common factor. Right, which is the thing we always look for first. It's not a difference of squares because it's a trinomial, not a binomial. So we're going to have to go back to that process where we look for two numbers that multiply, in this case, to positive 10, and those same two numbers need to add or subtract, right, to negative 7. It just depends on the signs. Again, because this here is a plus, right, if we're going to multiply to positive 10, that means we either have two positives or two negatives, which means we're going to have to add to 7. We start with the multiply. There's only a few ways you can multiply to 10. Oops. It is true 2 times 5. I like to just sort of start in order. So we start with 1. 1 times 10. Pen's a little slow today. 2 times 5. And that's it. And hopefully you can see that 2 and 5 are going to make 7. The slight issue is we have this negative sign here to worry about. So we'll have to use a negative 2 and a negative 5. Not sure why there we go. And we'll do a check here that negative 2 times negative 5 works. Right. So, I don't know, my pen is not cooperating today, but hopefully this will still work. Right, negative 2 times negative 5 equals positive 10, check. Negative 2 plus negative 5 equals negative 7, check. All right, so then we're able to just sort of drop this down into the parentheses, x minus 2, x minus 5. Again, the order doesn't matter. If you had negative 5 and negative 2 in that order, it would still be the same answer. Okay, now in a future video, I'll be showing you sort of the in-between steps of why this works this way. But for now and for this semester, if you see the trinomial, you fill in the blanks, this is perfectly fine. Okay. Now the one sort of asterisk there or little note there is that we've always assumed that the number in front of the x squared is really a 1. If it's not, we're going to have to change the process a little bit and learn these in-between steps. Okay. So when we get to a problem like this, which is sort of the next step up type of problem, it is a trinomial, right? But we do have this problem that this is not a 1 anymore. We have a 2 in front of the x squared. Now that seems like a problem, and it would be a problem, except before we try this whole trinomial method that we've been learning, I think the first thing we always want to look for is when we see a series of terms here, is to see if there's any kind of greatest common factor. And if you look at these three terms, remember when you're looking for a greatest common factor, it could be a number, a coefficient, or it could be a variable. In this case, the greatest common factor is 2. All three of these terms have a 2. So if we factor the 2 out, we're going to get left with an x squared minus 7x plus 10. Okay. So if you notice, what's in the parentheses, x squared minus 7x plus 10, well, that's the problem we just did right here. Okay. So if that wasn't the case, we would come over here, we would set up our two blanks, right, and we would try to make this equal to 10, and then we would have to add doesn't want to cooperate still, to negative 7. Let's see if my finger will work better. There we go. I'll try writing with my finger if that helps. And then we would fill in the blanks just like we did before, right? But we already did this, so we know the answers are negative 2 and negative 5. We know the answer here is negative 2 and negative 5. Okay, so what do we do with that? Well, that, right, is the answer for this. Okay, what we can't forget about is that the original problem here also had this 2 in front. So what we're going to do is just sort of carry the 2 down, right? and then replace the part that's underlined in green there, right, with the part we got. So the key thing to understand is that this x minus 2, x minus 5, there's a lot of stuff going on here. Let me try to clean some of this up. Let me see if I can get rid of this arrow here. All right, the idea here is that this x minus 2, x minus 5 brings us back, if we were to multiply it out, to the x squared minus 7x plus 10, right, that we're seeing right here. And then if we were to distribute the 2, right, that would bring us back to what we started with. So the key is, and you can always check, is that when you finish the problem, you should always be able to multiply it back out. So if we multiply this back out, this would give us x squared minus 7x plus 10. But if we multiplied the 2 through, right, that would give us, right, and again, this is just our check. This is our answer right up there. This would give us 2x squared minus 14x plus 20. Right, that's our check. So the answer, just to make it clear, is all of this. It's the 2 and the x minus 2, x minus 5. Okay. So for this semester, right, if there's a trinomial and that x squared coefficient is anything other than 1, we're going to have to be able to factor that out as a GCF, or it's going to turn out to be prime. Remember, there's always the option that it's prime. Okay? So this is a two-step factoring. First, we had to take the GCF out, right? We took the 2 out. Then we had to break this part down. And that's, something we've done before. Sometimes when we have a simplified problem, first we clear the parentheses and then we combine like terms, or when we reduce fractions, sometimes we get it down a little bit and then get it down more. It's a two-step process, and you just kind of have to look at what you have and see what you can do. All right, so let's try another one here. Oops, my A did not make it onto this here. Okay, so we're looking at a cubed plus 8a squared minus 20a. And your first thought might be to look at this cubed and say, well, we didn't learn cubes. How are we going to do this? And that's a fair question, right? But before we get too worried about it, we're going to start with our process. We always look for the GCF first, right? So we look at these three terms. What do they all have in common? Well, they all have an a in common, right? When we factor the a out, we're going to get x squared plus 8a minus 20. Right? And now we've got something we can handle. Right? Again, the a is already factored out. That's going to stay there. This right here is a problem like we did in the previous class. So it's a trinomial. If it's sort of confusing being over here, right, then what we can do is we can try to just sort of make some room and separate here and kind of do this as its own problem off to the side. Right? What if you had a squared plus 8a minus 20? Right? It's a trinomial. There is no common factor, so you're looking for two numbers that multiply to negative 20. Those same two numbers have to add, right, to positive 8. So we start with the factors of 20. Right? We'll deal with the negative sign later. Right? We have 1 times 10. We have 1 times 20. Right? 2 times 10, right, we all make mistakes, and 4 times 5. Okay. Now I said we're going to deal with that minus sign later, right? The minus sign here, if two numbers multiply to a negative, that means one's positive and one's negative, and that means they're going to have a subtracted effect. So we really need to have two numbers that subtract to 8, and that's going to be 2 and 10. Now again, you can write those in any order you want. I like to just keep the order we have. But if it's easier for you to think of 10 minus 2, you could do that. I'm going to say negative 2 plus 10. Okay. Once you realize the 10 and the 2 get you to 8, the key is what kind of 2 and what kind of 10. They have to have opposite signs, but you have to decide which one should be positive and which one should be negative. The bigger sign wins, and since we want to end up with a plus 8, right, the 10 has to be positive. So we fill in our blanks. Right? We do a quick check. Negative 2 times 10 is negative 20. Check. Negative 2 plus 10 is 8. Check. Right? You can always use a calculator to check that. And what that means is this part here that's underlined in green, right, the trinomial, is going to be turned into a minus 2 and a plus 10. Right? I think in a lot of cases it's worth sort of taking this off to the side so you can sort of even use your hand to cover up the other side, or just kind of focus your energy in one spot and then bring the work back in. Okay? Now the thing we have to remember is we did this part here that was underlined, but we can't forget that the original problem also had an a out front. Right? If you don't bring the a down, you're never going to get back to this a cubed or this a squared or this 20a that we need. Okay? So we went off to the side so we could isolate the part we needed to, but we have to come back and put everything back in. Okay? So, if you're seeing something that doesn't look like a typical trinomial, right? If it's not an x squared, an x and a number, or an a squared, an a and a number, or whatever the variable is, if it's got a number in front of the x squared, or it's got another exponent higher than x squared, then chances are we're going to need to use the GCF. And sometimes we'll be able to go further, and sometimes we won't. Okay, so it's really going to take some practice. They're going to have to get mixed in with the others. These definitely are harder because they take 2 steps of factoring. And, if I was going to give you a test with, 7 or 8 factoring problems, there might be one of these. But it's still important to know how to do it. Okay, so after you get the regular trinomials, right, like this part over here, under control, then it's probably a good idea to step up and try some of these and mix them in. Okay. All right, so it's important that you look at the next set of homework problems in 4.3 that has these, and we'll eventually be sort of mixing them all together, and then we'll sort of learn the in-between steps that let us fill in the parentheses. It's called factoring by grouping, but that'll be coming up in the next video.